Welcome to the Early Night Show with Anway Pramanik.
Hello and welcome to another episode. The penultimate episode of this season. One more away from 25, calling it the end of the first ever season of Anway Pramanik's Early Night Show. I invite you to this episode. It's going to be a very specific episode about a specific topic with very specific things happening in it. So if you're someone who has absolutely no interest in metal, has never heard a metal song, has never ever liked Linkin Park, if you're someone who has no interest in music, this podcast is not for you. If you're someone, on the other hand, who is a devout metalhead, or at one point of time really enjoyed metal, or want to learn to appreciate or understand metal more, this one's for you. To be honest, I think in India, at least apart from the Northeast, I think metal is dead. When I say dead, I mean to say that the guys who were the torchbearers, there was no one to take the torch from the previous generation of metal torchbearers. The modern generation didn't go into becoming musicians in India at all. I think it's because they realized it's not possible. It's not the way we imagine it to be at all. So that's why I think, metal was really big when you had that generation of hard rock listeners, those rich Bangaloreans whose children grew up in the city listening to metal. And then they influenced their friends, and then an entire generation of metalheads grew up in the city. This is your good days of 2004 to 2012, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 2012, 13, 14. It's a good era of metal in Bangalore, in India on a whole, but now it's pretty much, it's no longer the culture it used to be. It's no longer a cultural thing. I mean, Opeth has to come to India in an NH7 gig where it's not a headlining act. So you understand, right? That's what metal has become. It's a gimmick for those who want to enjoy it. Good and bad in its own way. Bad because obviously I'm not going to get to witness metal bands as much. I think the last metal band I saw live was the Ocean Collective or Polyphia. One of them. One of these two. In Bangalore. So yeah, I'm going to do this podcast in two halves. The first half of this podcast, I'm going to explore the entire history of metal. The second half of the podcast, I'm going to talk about why I think metal isn't metal anymore. First, let's start with the history of metal. In this, you and I are going to explore the history of metal, where it started, how metal evolved, different offshoots of metal, subgenres, genres. How do you identify metal from metal? How do you know which metal is for you? It's going to be fun because I'm going to assume the role of a pundit for once and speak, so it's going to be fun. Anyways, to start off, I would say the biggest influences on early metal, or I would say one of the first names in metal, undoubtedly Black Sabbath. I mean, Tony Iommi pelting those riffs, Geezer Butler on those bass riffs, Bill Ward on those drums, Ozzy Osbourne on those vocals. Those guys really industrialized or created that industrialized heavy machinery sound, which became the trademark of metal going forward. Those riffing, the snare, the double kicks. Yes, I mean, I'll get to their direct influences a little after, but I think they were the first. They were like the first metal, original metal boys, the Black Sabbath. And I would say that Led Zeppelin had an iota of influence, especially with their Bonzo's heavy drumming, John Bonham's heavy drumming. It really influenced metal to an extent. Then I think after these guys came your original, who came after this? I would say after these guys came your original metal. Like the original early metal, if I have to put it as in that way. This is your Judas Priest. Those boys, the Judas Priest era of metal. You had your fast riffs coming in, the more screechy vocals, the screams, the double bass, the heavy power drumming, the riffing. Those things were being born a lot along those lines with the likes of Judas Priest coming in and totally taking it to the next level. Then I think heavy metal by itself broke into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think 5 subgenres of metal. 6 subgenres of metal, I would say, and we'll explore them one by one. First one, obviously, is your power metal, right? If I have to give you an example, I mean, the first power metal brand that I can think of would probably be Manowar. Except. That's the band. Except. So you have your power metal. Then you also had progressive metal, which was a direct resultant of that. Progressive metal could be your Dream Theater. Right? Then also you could say the new wave of British heavy metal, that is your Iron Maiden. Of course, directly influenced by stoner itself, Black Sabbath itself, came your stoner metal or your grunge or your doom metal. Stoner and doom. So you're that stoner, doom, sludge, those 3 genre of metal. And I would say stoner would be like your Candlemas, your Cathedral, Kyuss, those guys. I said 6, right? 6 subgenres. So I said power metal, that's 1. Progressive metal, that's 1. Stoner metal, that's 1. New wave of British heavy metal, that's 1. Then came glam metal. Glam metal was your Poison, Motley Crue. Those guys. And of course, that slowly evolved into goth metal on its own. But there was another one which was your death metal. So these were the 6 main genres that I think came. And of course, there would be 7 actually. There's your power metal, progressive metal, stoner metal, new wave of British heavy metal, goth, glam, death metal. Now your death metal is your Cannibal Corpse. Then also there was another one. There would be 7 then. There was black metal as well, which was taking its roots in Norway. So let's just go through this thing. So your Black Sabbath, 60s, UK, London, they form the sound, which then gets picked up by the American boys, Judas Priest, who then take it to the next level with their fast riffing. From that comes these 7 offshoots. Comes the first one, that is your power metal. Your power metal could be like your Accept, Manowar, very American, very European. Progressive metal, Dream Theater, born in America. Then you had your stoner metal, absolutely born in America. Most of the stoner metal bands are American. Then you had thrash metal. So you had European thrash, the 4 European thrash bands. And you had the 4 American thrash bands. European thrash bands were a lot more metal. American thrash bands were influenced a lot by metal, hard rock, country to an extent. I mean, Metallica has crazy country influences in it. And then obviously death metal, which is again very American and European a concept, more American. And then you have your goth metal and your power metal, which is again very European, very, very European. Goth metal and power metal, the hard, fast melodies, is very, very European. And then, of course, you have the black metal, which is absolutely Scandinavian. It's very, very, very Scandinavian. Norway, Sweden, Norway more. It's very, very Scandinavian. And you have your new wave of British heavy metal. That is your British. Iron Maiden, Motorhead, Angel Witch, Diamond Head to an extent. These gentlemen. Now, from these guys came a bunch of more subgenre, if I may. From these guys came your melodic. Now your melodic and technical influences started coming in more. Some bands started going very technical. Some bands started going very melodic. Like you have your technical death metal bands. A technical death metal band would be like, give me a good example of a technical death metal band. Would be not Cannibal. I mean, all death metal bands are extremely technical. But if I have to think of a technical death metal band, then I would say maybe like, I would say Death. These guys were one of the first technical death metal bands, Gorod. Gorod is more new. Technical death metal, Nile, Carl Sanders, George Kolias, and what's the other guy's name? I forgot. Dallas Toller Wade. Those three guys. They created that technical, like that. It's not much melody in that. So if you're now, I'll first break these down. If you're someone who likes hard rock and wants to experience a slightly more evil hard rock, Black Sabbath. If you're someone who can understand Black Sabbath, likes Led Zeppelin, likes Linkin Park, then you should definitely try out thrash metal, Metallica. You should definitely try out new wave of British heavy metal, that is your Iron Maiden. You should definitely try out power and speed metal. It's very, very approachable. If you want a slightly more aggressive music, you can go to death metal and black metal. Black metal is a more artistic. Death metal is you take a chainsaw and tear someone up. Black metal is you cut someone's entrails and you make very beautiful pagan art out of it. That's the difference. Black metal is art in death. Death metal is death in death, brutality in death. So that can help you choose. You'll find a lot of black metal bands who are aggressive, but they're very beautiful to listen to. Similarly, you'll find a lot of death metal bands that may not have a lot of context, but it's very aggressive. It'll get you there, So you can take a choice if you want something that's aggressive, but death metal also has its sense of spirituality in it, Now, if you want a more melodic death metal, then you could go for your Kalma and you can go for Children of Bodom. If you want a more technical death metal, you can go for Nile. You can go for what is the other band? Death. Now, the difference between technical and melodic death metal is the songs, melodic death metal songs, are those songs which have really fruity and floral melodies, like Mors Principum Est, like Children of Bodom, like I said. And then you have these technical death metal bands that are more aggressive, more songwriting driven, more pattern structures, the way the songs build up on one another. Not very melody driven at all. Like, I mean, the only Nile song I like is a Nile song which has a lot of melody in it. Sacrifice unto Sobek. Otherwise, Nile is very difficult to understand. Even for me, a very hardcore metalhead, I find Nile very difficult to understand. Now, from these guys came your modern generation of metal, which is your technical death metal, melodic death metal, metalcore. So your technical death metal and melodic death metal is what I just told you. Then came metalcore. Metalcore was your, like August Burns Red, Bullet for My Valentine. It was more, these are two big names, As I Lay Dying. These were your metalcore, like hard Killswitch Engage. These were your metalcore bands. In addition to these guys, there was another genre that was coming up. There was new metal. There was your rap and hip hop in metal, like Korn, Slipknot. POD, Limp Bizkit. And there was another thing that was coming out that was your industrial metal, like Marlon Manson, Static X. I was just listening to Static X before this. Then came your grindcore. So your industrial metal is very European. Very European. Your grindcore is very American, like your Napalm Death, Exhumed. Your metalcore again is very American, very, very American. I mean, this is when America was at its peak of metal, just creating the best. And along with these guys came your hard alternative bands like your Rage Against the Machine, Linkin Park. What is that? Breaking Benjamin. And also Swedish death metal, which is your, like Soilwork, Dark Tranquillity, In Flames, Catatonia. So that's how metal evolved and metal became what it is today. I mean, and then after these guys, I mean, metalcore was like the last innovation. After that, it became gent. I mean, Meshuggah was one of the early bands. 90s, 80s, they were not very popular then. Late 2000s, they became super fucking popular. Their sound became a lot experimental, very universal sounds. I fucking love Meshuggah. I mean, it took me 3 years to get into it. I think I did a podcast about them, but Meshuggah, and from Meshuggah, you have this entire new genre of progressive and gent that is formed. Gent with your Periphery and progressive with your Tesseract. These two genres were formed and taken to the next level. So this is a brief history of metal. I mean, there's so much I've missed out on. Like I've probably just touched the base, like probably just 10% I've probably touched base on today. When did what was my experience with metal? When did I stop being a metalhead? What is my relationship with metal now? And where I see metal going? These are 4 questions I'll answer. My relationship with metal, I fucking am like I say this all the time, like if I ever get stopped at a metal detector test, it's because there's metal in my blood which is being detected. I'm a metalhead through and through. I mean, the whole idea of having a band, touring, having gigs, having a guitar, distortion, playing fucking shredded riffs, solos, growling, on stage, songs, concept albums, lyrics, death metal. I thrive on these things, right? I love it. How did that happen? Anyways, yeah. Ignore that, guys. I got interrupted. But what I'm trying to say is, so first question, I love metal. My blood is in metal. Everything I've always wanted. I know if I was born in the US somewhere, I would have at least spent a year or two or 5 years in a metal band. I spent a year in a metal band in Bangalore. We did pretty well. 4 albums, bunch of live gigs. We got featured on Metal Hammer. That was amazing. Metal Hammer, Variety Magazine. Variety Magazine is to Hollywood. Variety Magazine is to Hollywood what Wired Magazine is to Silicon Valley startups is what Metal Hammer is to metal, international metal community. And we were featured on a Metal Hammer issue where they gave this free compilation disc with their magazine, Grindcore compilation. We were on it. Fucking amazing. Still remember that. And I think that's primarily because at that point of time, I had written 2 articles on Metal Hammer. And I was also a metal journalist for Metal Base India. I used to go to all these free gigs in the city and interview bands and Animals as Leaders, Carcass, Catatonia. Who else have I interviewed? Like bunch of bands I've interviewed. I still remember. Ocean Collective. I've interviewed. Can't remember. D-Side, was it? Someone else. One more band I've interviewed. Gorguts. Those guys. So yeah. That happened next, and then 2 incidents led to me falling out of metal. For me, I've always believed metal to be like the anti to the system, right? The system, metal is always going to be the anti. It's always against the system. System says go left, metal is like, fuck you, I'm going right. Metal will be like, I'm not moving. That's metal. So that's the metal I fell in love with. I've always believed that metal is non-sellout. It's a spirit. Like, I'll get to it, okay? So I remember 3 things actually led me to hating the metal community as such. One is the elitism. Metal is the best. We are metalheads. We are better than you. Because we listen to this kind of metal, we are the cream of the crop. Old metal is better than new metal. That fucking shit got to me, okay? I hated the elitists in the metal community. So that was one of the first things that I told myself. I'll stop calling myself a metalhead. I mean, I am a metalhead. But I stopped displaying that, side of me because I fucking thought it became very fascist. Second is the sellout thing. I always believe that metal is not a band that sells out, but I've realized that the best metal bands today are the ones who sold out at one point of time, or at least decided that they have to sell out a certain side of themselves. When I say the best metal bands, I mean the most popular, the ones who are doing the best gigs. Slipknot, Metallica, Iron Maiden. When I say sellout, I mean their entire journey into metal is against the system. And then they get integrated to the system. Again, no hate. I mean, I would do the same. That's when I realized, like, metal isn't actually against the system. Metal is just like any other music genre. The more popular you get picked up, and then you have to sell out, or you fucking get lost through the ages. And then finally, just a second. I forgot, I missed something. Okay, just a second. Yeah, and then finally another thing is about that it was at a gig and I realized that I wanted to play Tash with some beggar kids. I've spoken about this before and I didn't because my bandmates were all like, hey macha, don't do that. You don't know those people and stuff. And I'm like, dude, the whole point of metal is to stand up for those people, beggars and homeless, and you're telling me to stay away? That's when I realized, metalheads will only be metalheads as long as they're getting pussy or they're getting recognition. After that, they stop being metalheads. Majority of us. So that's when I started falling off. So I've answered now, what is my relationship with metal? Like, dude, I love metal. I mean, I've coming back to listening to a lot of metal these days, and even like I'm going through my playlist. Okay, I will tell you what is usually the kind of albums that I have on my iTunes, right? So I have Jeremy Soule, he's a classical music producer. The Ocean Collective, so fucking I told you sludge band. Maroon 5, Storm Corrosion, Death, Elliot Moss, Shabaka and the Ancestors, that's jazz. Death is that technical death metal band. Elliot Moss is like a pop electronica artist. Storm Corrosion is like an ambient avant-garde art rock album. Maroon 5 we all know. Justin Timberlake we all know. X-Toll is Christian metal. Nicki Minaj I have. OTT I have, which is your very, very esoteric music. Khalid, which is American pop. Pink Floyd, Textures, which is math metal. Mute math, more pop. Dualist Inquiry, Indian EDM. Dream Theater, that's your progressive. Cell, that is your electronica. Snarky Puppy, we all know Snarky Puppy. Chemical Brothers, Christina Aguilera, Linkin Park. So it's a fucking mix. It's a mix of everything. I mean, I've never limited like, as a metalhead, I hated all other genres. Once I told myself, dude, that's such a mind control, right? Like, to become a metalhead and hate everything else. That's when I started experimenting with other genres, and now I can't. I listen to everything. I have to listen to everything. I mean, it's boring otherwise. So that's the second question of what is metal to me right now. Then finally, where I see metal going, I think metal has evolved to become like like a mix of electronica, pop, influencer marketing, and metal now. To be honest, it's a big mix of these four things. I mean, a lot of metal bands like Trivium is still doing live streams on YouTube with their vocalists going live and doing crazy things. That's Trivium, dude, the fathers of metalcore. And these guys created, destroyed, erased, and improved metalcore. Polyphia, extremely pop band. I mean, I'm pretty sure I played a sample of Polyphia's music sometime during this podcast. So poppy. So good. My metal band was more sludge, more doom metal, partly because I was a very bad guitar player. So I like to play slow riffs so I could play them live. It's pretty good live I was, but I was not very technically gifted as a guitar player. So yeah, that's what happened. And I think that if not for the certain, like, metal made me the kind of thinker that I am today. Metal is very, very expressive, very deep thinking. If you've heard Tool's lyrics, you will know exactly what I mean by how deep metal can go. If you've heard of Opeth, or if you've heard of Death, or if you've heard of any fucking metal band, dude, any metal band, like, the lyrics of any metal song, what you might be hearing as is actually like, sacrifice unto me your deepest desires, sacrifice unto me your most delicious thoughts. And he's growling like that, like, sacrifice into me your deepest desires, sacrifice into me your most delicious thoughts. So yeah, I mean, it's very misunderstood. And I just wanted to do this podcast today. I don't know why. I felt like doing it. I believe that if I had my metal friends, this would have been a 10-time better podcast to do. I mean, I'm going to listen to some Gojira after this. I mean, there's so much to do with metal. I mean, so fucking much to do. I mean, I'm just looking at all the albums that I have. Like, so much metal. I mean, Nevermore, Necrophagist, Catatonia, Die Catafalque. Jesus Christ. Alcest, Godspeed You, Black Emperor. I'm just showing off right now, I know, but I love it. Xanthocroid. Jesus Christ. Mestis. Oh man, Mastodon. Oh my god. Whew. So if you've stayed so far, I hope you have understood how much I love metal, and how no other genre can ever replace what metal is to me, in terms of me staying up in the night, looking up those guitars, wanting to buy those guitars, picking up the guitar, learning to play like a certain guy, trying to write songs like him. Mikael Åkerfeldt, Metal Jesus. So yeah, if you've stayed with me for so far, I hope this podcast was fun. I hope you had fun listening to it. I mean, I had a lot of fun listening to it. Doing it. As we sign off on the penultimate episode of season 1, I want to say thank you for being with me for so long, and I hope you've finished your drink. I mean, I've almost done with my drink. I'm going to down it now. Done. Thank you for joining me. It's 9:35 in the night, and I'm gonna sign off on this note. Hope you enjoyed this one. Looking forward to seeing you in the next one. Till then, it's Anway Pramanik signing off for the Early Night Show. Good night. Bye-bye.